Love it or hate it, the addition of Sunder charms and terror zones in patch 2.5 season 2 had a pretty big effect on the overall meta of Diablo 2. Now, obviously we're talking specifically about ladder play at this point. The builds that have always been the MVPs, the Super S Plus tier builds, as well as the builds that just really couldn't find a footing, found a lot of wiggle room here as far as what their overall build strength is in comparison to one another. So what I thought might be kind of interesting is actually going through and seeing what these changes have had on the tiering of each individual class and the builds inside of it and how they kind of match up now. One of the big takeaways is that Sunder charms in general made a lot of elemental builds a lot stronger or viable in any way, shape, and form. Magic builds obviously kind of got nothing out of the deal, and then physical builds, while gaining some additional strength, in comparison have really gained a lot less than the elemental builds. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to do every class. We're going to start with the Amazon. I'm going to show you where these classes end up on a tier list now and give a little bit of overview of how they ended up there. Obviously, we're going to start from the worst and we're going to work our way up to the best. And when we're talking about the worst current Amazon build, what we're really talking about is multiple shot. Multiple shot, multi-shot, physical Boazon is arguably the weakest Amazon build in the game right now. Now, this doesn't mean that it's a terrible build. It just means in comparison to all of the other Amazon builds, this is in the D tier. It's in the low end of the D tier as well. Now, that being said, it does mean that as of right now, we don't consider any Amazon builds to be in the F tier. So like GG to the Amazon. The second least worst build that the Amazon now has is actually the Exploding Arrow Amazon. Fire Boazon was already fine, but going pure fire really doesn't gain you a lot over just speccing into the Exploding Arrow on an Ice Boazon. Going pure fire now is pretty decent. The big issue that Exploding Arrow Boazon is going to run into is that while it can run Enigma, its FCR frames are going to be complete crap. And because there aren't many low fire resistance or low fire immune monster areas right off from a waypoint, it's not nearly as strong as Ice Boazon, but you can play it. The last build in the D tier is actually Jab Fend. Now, Jab Fend is a pretty decent build overall. They've done a lot to make it a lot stronger, but since the physical Sunder charm really didn't gain the Jab Fend Amazon anything that she didn't already have through the rest of her gear or her mercenary, it doesn't really bump up at all, but it's making a pretty good contender in the D tier. In the C tier, we start off with the Plague Javazon. Now, the Plague Javazon was already a perfectly fine build, but it was mostly confined to just running cows, and in some wild circumstances, running stuff like Chaos Sanctuary. While Poison Sunder Charms didn't really shake up the meta too much, it did make it so that if you are a poison build, you can pretty effectively go farm anywhere, especially if you're being super big brain and using the Death's Web on swap. You can actually stack enough minus resistance so that even against previously poison immune monsters, you're doing a really good amount of damage. The other benefit is that Plague Javazon just has strictly better FCR frames than any of the bow counterparts, so while it may not be able to do as much AoE damage as quickly as some of the other builds, it can still teleport as fast as Lightning Fury, and there's something to be said about that. Freezing Arrow is the top of the C list here. It's our last build that would be considered below average. Freezing Arrow tops off this C tier here. We think that it's the strongest C tier build, and it's mostly due to the fact that it has a lot of really good places to farm right off from the waypoint, and in general, cold builds especially are able to very easily stack minus resistance since the majority of your base gear carries it on it anyways. Then on top of that, the Freezing Arrow Amazon is nearly unkillable because her CC is almost unmatched, and her damage output is absolutely bananas. Even if you don't have a good terror zone to walk into, you just go farm Arachnid Lair until you wait an hour and a new one shows up. Strafe Boazon is actually in the B tier at this point, and there's a couple reasons why. The first one being that Strafe actually allows you to very easily apply things like amplified damage from Anatma's Scarab. So as opposed to multiple shot, who kind of struggles because it's only the 2 middle arrows are going to apply on striking effects like that, each arrow from Strafe is typically going to get a proc off at some point, especially if it's piercing through multiple targets. Strafe in general just has a really good DPS, it has really good clear speed, and while it benefits a lot from the ridiculous amount of gear that you need to put onto a physical Boazon for her to be good, it benefits more than multiple shot does. because it turns out firing off 10 arrows into a pack that you specifically want to hit is a lot better than shooting off 24 arrows and only having 5 to 10 of them hit on average. Lightning Strike finds itself in the A tier. Lightning Strike very quickly developed itself as like one of the best uber killing builds, and it's absolutely fantastic. There's a lot of arguments for Lightning Strike being better than Lightning Fury. That math just doesn't work out, but there are absolutely some scenarios, depending on monster density, where Lightning Strike is going to be able to output more DPS, but in most circumstances, especially where you want to be farming on a high density build, it comes just a little bit short of the only build in the S tier for the Amazon, which is obviously Lightning Fury. So both Lightning Fury and Lightning Strike gain a ton out of the Sunder charms. They were already good enough to break almost every lightning immune in the game, and just being able to break them all this much easier and bring them that much further down into resistance just means that these builds went absolutely through the roof. In fact, when we're comparing the S and the A tier here, what we're really talking about is like 2 or 3 tiers higher than the B tier, but it would be weird if this was just an S++ and an S+ ranking for these two builds. I think that there's a significant difference between Lightning Fury and Lightning Strike, where the stratification between S and A makes sense. But there you go. That is your Amazon tier list, considering everything that's changed in Season 2 along with Sunder Charms and Terror Zones. Let me know what you think. Do you have any dissenting opinions? Do you think any of these rankings should have been different? Let me know down in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. I know there's going to be a lot of arguments about Lightning Fury versus Lightning Strike, and I'll just go ahead and say it. Lightning Fury is just better. There's almost no math that you can tell me that's going to make it so that Lightning Strike is a better build. Again, I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it helped to put Season 2 changes into a little bit more context. I look forward to seeing you in the next one.